Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the macro topic of unemployment. So the first question, what does it mean to be unemployed? So maybe when you're thinking about not working, you think of retirement or vacations or moments in time when you're not working. But here we are. Here's my family when we're not working. Um, but that's not what unemployed means. When we say unemployed, it's not simply not working. It's a much more technical definition. And so when the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right, which is within the Department of Labor, when they determine, or collect or put together the unemployment numbers, the figures, the unemployment rate, the number of employed people, the workforce, these are the elements that they're looking for. According to the BLS, you're unemployed if you are 16 years of age or older, if you're not institutionalized, if you are not working, and you are actively seeking work. So if you're under 16, you don't count as unemployed, even if you're not working and want to work. If you're institutionalized, if you're incarcerated or something, then you are outside of the workforce and you can't count as unemployed. If you are currently working, you can't be unemployed. So you might be looking for a better job, but you are not technically unemployed if you are in fact working. So that's the nuts and bolts, the high level of how they collect the unemployment information, or at least who gets counted in that. So, what is the optimal rate of unemployment? And I've got the big red bar on here. It's not zero, right? Because you might say, well, in a sense, being unemployed is bad, and so we would prefer to have zero unemployment. Well, that's not exactly true. And so to think about that, we have to look at the reasons that people are unemployed, or in a sense, what are the categories or types of unemployment. So the first one I want to talk about, the first type of unemployment, is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is caused by large changes in the kinds of things that people produce. So I've got a couple examples of this. One, on this slide, you can see a woman sitting at a telephone switchboard. Right? So there used to be operators who, when you picked up the phone, someone would ask what number you wanted, and they could connect you, to either the right number or to a different operating station closer to where the phone was located, and you get connected. We don't have that anymore. Right? They're automatic dialers, and now it's with cell phones. So telephone operators over time became structurally unemployed as those jobs disappeared. You may recognize this as a thruway, a New York State thruway entrance or exit. And these people, right, the toll takers, some of them have already been displaced by E-ZPass. You may be aware of the plan to further, to ultimately eliminate all of the toll takers on the thruway. Those are in some sense, some would say those are good, steady state jobs that are going away. But others would say, I would say that that's a kind of structural employment, that those individuals are working in an industry, in a type of job that's being replaced by automation. And some people lament this, right? There definitely are people who think that this is bad, for people, and individuals, and certainly there will be hardships, right, for some of those individuals. But those jobs are, they're dangerous in a sense, like the health effects of standing there by that car exhaust all day long. They're not good for people. It can be replaced, readily by automation. It probably reduces the costs. And ultimately, as an economist, I trust and hope that most of those people will ultimately find employment doing something else, something where they can be more productive. Right? It's the purpose of a job is not just to employ someone. The purpose is to produce something useful and beneficial for society. I mean, that's what makes society richer. So that's why jobs, just giving people jobs, digging ditches and filling them back in, is not ultimately successful. And you can employ people, but if you're not producing something of value, then how do you ultimately generate the revenue to pay people? So that change in society is what an economist, Joseph Schumpeter, called creative destruction. And it's the idea that over time things change, and the way we make things and the way we do things changes, and therefore the jobs that are needed to accomplish those tasks change as well. So one kind of unemployment is called structural unemployment, and that has to do with massive changes in what we produce and how it's made. So anytime you see automation replacing workers, in a sense that's a kind of structural unemployment. If you're familiar with Billy Joel's music, right, the song Allentown, right, which describes the closing of steel mills. Part of that is not just because of how the steel is made, but also where it came from, right? As steel imported from Japan became cheaper and a lower resource cost than steel made domestically, steel mills closed. So another type of unemployment is called frictional unemployment. And frictional unemployment is sort of the matching of workers and skills with jobs and the demands of the labor force. So frictional unemployment is when you graduate from college but you don't yet have a job, right? You have these skills, you're trying to get matched up with where your passion and your skills make you most productive. You haven't yet found that match. Meanwhile, out there are probably employers who are looking for employees, and they have not yet. Those jobs are open. Those jobs are still vacant because they haven't yet found that right match. So those are some examples of unemployment, right? Or I'm sorry, of frictional unemployment. Whenever people move from one city to another, so sometimes a family, sometimes let's say one spouse takes a job in a new city and everybody moves there, and then the second spouse, who might have been working previously, is now looking for a job again in the new place. That's frictional unemployment. So that's just the process of matching up the right people, right, with the right skills, with the jobs where they're most productive. That's frictional unemployment, and that's also normal in a working economy. Sometimes it takes time. That the process of matching jobs and workers is not instant, right, and frictionless. Right, there's a certain amount of time and energy in what we call friction in that market, and it takes time to work it out. So frictional unemployment is another type of unemployment. So structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, those are pretty standard, and even in a healthy healthy economy that's functioning well, there will be those types of unemployment. Now, one of the ones that we might be more concerned about is called cyclical unemployment. And so in this graph over here on the right, this actually charts help wanted advertising, right, in the newspaper. You could also look at a chart with overall GDP, GDP per capita, or actually just GDP would be effective over time, and you can see whenever it's in decline, or holding steady, when there's a recession and it's going down, there will be a lot more unemployment. And so here, this is help wanted advertising in the newspapers, and what you can see here is that during the Great Depression, right, there were a lot fewer ads, and even for a while after that. In the Roaring 20s, right, there were a lot more ads, and then they dropped off suddenly. And so you can see over time that sometimes when the economy is in a recession or a depression or just not doing well, it's very, very difficult to find a job. That would be an example of cyclical unemployment, and that is definitely one that we don't think is sort of normal or healthy. There may be cycles of downturns, depressions, or recessions, and we'll see cyclical unemployment go up. That is actually not something that we think, well, that's just normal and that's okay. So there's a third type of unemployment. The last one, this is less maybe less important, but there's a certain amount of seasonal unemployment that happens, predictably with the changing of the seasons. So, Delaware and Maryland beach lifeguards, that's a seasonal job. Even in the construction trades, in the Northeast where the weather gets harsh, it's not uncommon to be unemployed for a period of time in sort of at least the January, February range, right, when the weather might be the harshest. I found this picture on the right of the guys in the I-beam. You see what they're recreating a famous photo, right, from the building of the skyscrapers in New York. I just thought that was cool. But that kind of seasonal unemployment, that is fairly expected. And these people, the people who are beach lifeguards, they probably have other jobs. They're probably either in school or they work in an industry that gives them the summers, free to do that, and they might do something else the rest of the year. People in the construction trades, if you ever study labor economics, you'll talk about compensating wage differentials, right? The reason that some jobs pay more than others. So if it requires more human capital, more skill, it might pay more. If it has more risk, there's usually a risk premium and it pays more. So these men or women, like the people who sit on I-beams, 50 stories up, there's a certain amount of risk to that, and they probably get compensated more than someone working in an office in a low-scale job, at least as a file clerk or something. Another aspect of that, another compensating wage differential is seasonal unemployment. So if you're in the construction trades and if it's common to be unemployed for a period of 6 weeks or 2 months a year, when the weather gets harshest, the equilibrium wage in that industry should be a little bit higher for the rest of the year to compensate for the fact that there's often periods of unemployment wrapped up in that particular job. So that's a little bit of an aside. I just want you to realize seasonal unemployment is another type of unemployment. So I'm going to try to divide this into two chunks so I don't make the video too long. So let's wrap up this section with the idea of the natural rate of unemployment. The natural rate of unemployment is basically the structural and the frictional elements, right? So this part, as I tried to illustrate as we went through there, structural unemployment as the economy changes what we make and how we make it, and frictional unemployment when people are between jobs and trying to get matched up, that's normal and healthy. And there will always be some people who are between jobs or some industries that are in flux, and people who are unemployed as a result of that, who will ultimately get retrained and picked up in a different industry, in a different function. That's all normal, and we think of that as the natural rate of unemployment. And people disagree on exactly how big that is, but most estimates put that somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. That at any point in time, 3 to 5% of the labor force might be either between jobs in frictional unemployment or industries that are in flux and changing and therefore unemployed. And that is totally normal and healthy. That allows the economy to have expansions, because when we have expansions, companies want to hire people up, and if there are no unemployed people, then the only way to hire someone is to lure them from another job, and that becomes problematic as well. So you could think to some extent that unemployed people are sort of the reserves for the labor force, for people working. But cyclical unemployment, this part is definitely not part of the normal healthy operation of the economy. Right? So that's above it. So that's the components. Seasonal unemployment is actually a very small part of the actual numbers of unemployment, but a certain amount of seasonal unemployment might be sort of normal or natural as well. But we don't include it in here because it's such a small part of it. All right, let's end with a quick example here. Here's just a couple people who are, I'm going to describe a couple people who are unemployed we'll figure out which category they would fit in. Construction workers can't find a job when the industry experiences a decline in demand during a recession. All right, well, which type of unemployment do we think this is? Well, decline in demand during a recession. This is going to be cyclical unemployment. All right, second one. Fast food workers who lose their jobs when kiosks are installed. They may need to be retrained in order to acquire skills which will land them future employment opportunities. Well, those kiosks, right, where you order, to the extent that they need fewer people in the fast food joint as a result of that. Which kind is that? Right, that's structural. That's a change in the way, the common way that things are accomplished. And here, recent college grad who is out, doesn't find a job for 3 months. That person, during that time when they are searching, they're polishing their resume, they're out interviewing, they're working. That's all frictional unemployment. So, there you go. Let's take a break, and then we're going to pick up with how to calculate the employment rate.